Hey guys, so today I just wanted to discuss and talk about the differences between planned aggregate expenditure versus actual aggregate expenditure because many people confuse the two and they misunderstand what they are exactly. So, as you can see in front of you, I'm going to um, go over the details on what makes them different. Planned ag- aggregate expenditure or planned investment, as the slide shows, it's just the amount of money, the production that firms are intending to put, um, are intending to make, um, are intending to produce. So it's the planned output for a given cycle. Um, an actual aggregate investment, that's just the amount um, that's just the amount of output, the level of the production that firms actually um, are able to spend and and sell. So that is the difference between the two, um, aggregate expenditure versus planned aggregate expenditure. And also to planned aggregate expenditure, it has different components to it than um, actual aggregate expenditure, which leads to the formula PAE equals um, A plus BY, where capital A stands for autonomous expenditures and B stands for marginal propensity to consume. Um, and I will show you that right now, or at least where that leads to. Uh, yep, in this formula, A equals autonomous expenditures, which are um, just things that that don't depend on GDP or income. These are payments that um, are just made autonomously. They are made regardless of GDP, like basic necessities, stuff like that. It doesn't change. Um, and marginal propensity to consume, that does change with disposable income. Um, and government expenditures, investment, and net exports, um, they aren't actually affected by the change in GDP so much. Um, government um, government expenditures are influenced by um, what the government perceives as necessary for its citizenry. So it's not exactly um, dependent on why, or it's not exactly dependent um, on changes to why, is what I'm trying to say. Right. So as you can see, when planned aggregate expenditure is less than actual aggregate expenditure, then the firms will decide to reduce output for the next period. And the reason why is because if their planned aggregate expenditures are greater than their actual aggregate expenditures, or are less than their actual aggregate expenditures, excuse me, then that means that they actually sold less than they were planning to sell because now they have more output left over at the end of the cycle. And then the opposite is true for when PAE is greater than actual aggregate expenditure because it means um, that the firm sold more than they planned to sell, and they're left with an even um, lesser amount in their inventories, in their stock. So they're going to increase output in the next period um, because of this new development. And this slide talks about that as well. The goes into um, detail about that. And right, like we talked about autonomous expenditures, that's just basic consumption. Um, Government expenditures, they do not depend on why. Um, Yeah. So those are just some quick tidbits on a brief overview of um, aggregate expenditures versus planned aggregate expenditures. And if you're still confused, then the Canvas slide does a pretty good job at um, explaining the differences. But in the meantime, have a good day.